Okay, so I want people at home to understand what Steve just said. So if there's going to be any influence on the bill, it's going to happen in committee, which is why we're having this long, drawn-out conversation about the committee process, because this is where these things can get influenced, right? If you at home want to get involved, it sounds like this is where the influence is taking place. If you want to reach out to Steve and make sure that he can have his influence, it seems like this is where this is going to be taking place. And on that note, as far as the two elements of influence, where you can do that, where the viewer at home can do that, where Steve can do that, where does that actually happen? Does it happen in these committee meetings as far as you're concerned? Or does convincing somebody that they're wrong, let's say, or to change their mind, is that something that happens in like a lunch date? Or like in the business world, the joke is that more business takes place on the golf course than does in the meeting room. Is that happening in that room? Where is the place that changing people's mind takes place?
I find it to be in Hartford more informal. So it's more of the latter as opposed to the former. I mean, it's more of the quote unquote golf course analogy, right? It's in the hallways of the legislature. It's a fellow colleague stopping me and saying, "Hey, I saw that bill that's in your committee on X, Y, and Z. And let me tell you why it's really bad for my district, or let me tell you why it's really good for my district," or whatever the case may be. And that is usually the most I've learned more in the hallways of the legislature, walking back and forth to my office or a committee room, etc., or getting lunch in the cafeteria or getting a cup of coffee, usually, than anything else. So also the biggest thing is constituents. An email I get from a constituent of mine saying, "Hey, hi, Steve, I saw this bill. This is really going to negatively impact my industry or my livelihood or whatever." That's going to perk up my ears right away and go, "Wow, this is something I got to pay attention to for my constituents." So that is the best way to influence a bill, I find, is the kind of informal reach out to your legislator. And even if your legislator may not sit on a particular committee, what I just talked about is really important, is that we obviously know our colleagues. So if there's a bill, I'm not on transportation, for example, but I know a lot of my colleagues that are on transportation. So if someone contacted me from New Milford, let's say, and said, "Hey, Steve, there's this bill before the transportation committee that does X, Y, and Z, and it would be really negatively impact myself, my family, whatever the case may be. I'm going to make sure now to speak with my colleagues that are on the transportation committee to say, hey, I spoke with my constituent, and this is what they're concerned about. Can you help me address this?" And it happens to be very effective. So that is the best way to.
So you mentioned these public hearings. It sounds like it's a long drive to Hartford. You're way better off saying, here's an email to Steve, or God forbid, here's a Facebook message or a Facebook post directed to Steve, and Steve can show his fellow senators, hey, listen, this is what my constituents right here. This is what they're saying. And that seems to be more. Are you implying that the public hearings are less effective participation from the public?
I would say it's equally effective.
Okay.
I think it's not. It's not to say that it's not, because being there in person, I have been. I got to say that the same goes for public hearings. I have sat through many public hearings, and I have been influenced by what people have testified to. I've thought, oh, I support this bill, or I like this bill, and then I'll give you an example. There was a bill to basically phase out plastic straws here in the state of Connecticut. Okay. And I have my own thoughts.
I have my own video on that on my YouTube channel, but go ahead.
Okay. So what was the most compelling testimony actually against that ban was individuals from the disability community that suffered from different disabilities or physical handicaps. And what they had expressed, and I had never even thought about it, and I think a lot of the people that proposed it had never even thought about that. For many individuals that suffer from certain disabilities, the only straw they can effectively use to drink was the plastic straws. That the metal straws and other straws actually hurt, would hurt them depending on what their disability may be or what they may suffer from. And a lot of the times they in some cases they wouldn't have the ability to pick up the drink and drink it just straight out of the cup. They need the straw to be able to drink it. So it was incredibly compelling testimony, and it brought to light an issue about the bill that I had never even crossed my mind until those individuals came up and provided that really critical testimony and changed a lot of minds. I'm almost positive the bill didn't even get raised for a vote after they came up and testified. So it killed the bill.
Okay.
Effectively.
So if people are going to do testimony, because, this is something I would like to start getting into if I can, even though it's a long drive out to Hartford. What actually works then? Because it sounds like what you're saying is that my way of presenting things with like raw data and saying, here's the data, this is demonstrably not going to be the case, or XYZ is just false. Here's an endless array of undeniable evidence that that's the case. Doesn't work as well as, well, here's this other idea, to be focusing in on an idea level rather than basically presenting a report, basically presenting an academic report.
So, so you're saying which is more effective, presenting?
Yeah. What is the thing that you would suggest if somebody was going to go provide testimony?
I would think it's more usually academic in terms of the testimony you receive, right? So,
but is that effective, or is that just what happens to come before the committees?
Yeah, it is effective. It is certainly effective because it's compelling. If you have data that can show that, hey, this is a bad idea, and here's why. I can show you all the numbers, and I can show you all the facts, and
okay,
that is compelling, and I think that's killed bills or it's promoted bills, however you want to look at it, for a while in Hartford. But I will say that personal story,
there we go,
personal touch, is unbelievably effective, and I would say that's the most effective, even more than data. Because you can kind of, like all reports and data, you can get lost in the numbers sometimes.
Well, numbers are probably not as relatable as humans.
Bingo. So when you hear that story about, wow, this is what this is going to do to my life if this bill passes, and negative or positive, and you could hear that personal story and that personal touch, I can tell you as a legislator that resonates with me, and I think it resonates with most human beings. It's just human nature to galvanize your thoughts to the thoughts of an individual about how a certain thing is going to impact their personal lives.
Okay, so folks at home, I hope you guys really paid attention to that part, because that's how you can have an effect on this legislation. Do send messages out to Steve. If you've got the temerity to drive all the way to Hartford, I would suggest preparing for it. I would suggest, since you're going to be on a timer, write it down, sit in front of your mirror, time it, right? Because from what I understand, you're going to be given a time. And from what I understand, it's just like town council. You get X number of minutes, and that's it. Wrap it up and then get it done.
So, Mike, you mentioned, if I can, just two quick things to add on to that, because those are really important points. One is, you're right. Generally, it's a 3-minute time.
That's it.
If you're coming from the public and you speak, you get about 3 minutes to speak. However, once a legislator asks you a question on what your testimony may be, it then becomes unlimited. So that timer then goes away. So it's good to have a friend to have a question basically planted. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So one thing that, if you will be testifying, one of the tricks of the trade is to ask your individual legislator, if they sit on the committee that you're going to be testifying in front of, hey, would you mind asking me a question to follow up on this or that? This is really cool, Steve. Like, I'm loving hearing the actual useful information about how to go about this. Yeah. So it's if you can get your legislator or someone to ask you a follow-up question, then it allows you much more flexibility. Now, ultimately, eventually, the chairs of the committee are going to say, well, hold on, you've been going on for 30 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Can you please, kind of summarize? But that official formal timer does go away once one question is asked. So. Okay. Just keep that in mind if you are going to testify, and please let me know, and hopefully I can help you in that regard.